The Butterfly Bureau, for people who still believe the truth matters. Questions they don't want answered, we're asking anyway. The truth was archived. We pulled it back into the light. This is not entertainment. This is documentation. Butterfly Bureau, truth, evidence, justice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Butterfly Bureau, episode 6. I'm here with my co-host, Nightfire, and also the extraordinary, brilliant, and renowned Nick Bryant. Mr. Bryant, thank you for joining us. I'm a little bit giddy, and I would be lying if I didn't say my daughter was fangirling because she studied sex trafficking in graduate school, and she knows all about you. So please tell us about you.
I'm a freelance journalist and author. Mm-hmm. I wrote academic papers for about 5 years that had to deal with biomedical ethics, more or less. And I'd studied philosophy in college. And I started to moonlight as a journalist. I took one journalism class in college, and I thought it was the most boring thing that anybody could ever take. And I thought, if I have to take another one of these classes, I'll spontaneously combust. So
I hear you.
But I loved philosophy classes, so I went to philosophy. And then I was in graduate school for a while, and then I ultimately ended up working as a biomedical ethicist. But I was writing these academic papers that were getting put in really good journals, and ultimately wrote a book, too, about lower socioeconomic children and how they're shortchanged in the United States. And despite the accolades, I was not having any kind of effect whatsoever. Everything that I was writing, I mean, I was getting paid well, I had a nice office, but everything.
But there wasn't change. There wasn't systematic change occurring.
I couldn't affect any, there was no change. I mean, people had to have PhDs to read what I was writing, so it was kind of ethereal. And then I started to moonlight as a journalist. And I came across this story. I'm from Minneapolis. I came across this story. There was a woman that ran an agency that helped prostitutes get back on their feet. She would provide them with room and board and just help them out. Mm-hmm. And she had said that there was a serial killer killing prostitutes. And she didn't seem psychologically stable. So she was essentially just blown off by both the media and also the law enforcement. But, and I tried to deal with her, and she was very difficult to deal with. But I started looking into it, and I talked in Minneapolis, there's a main drag, it's called Lake Street. And I talked to some prostitutes that would work Lake Street, and they told me that there's someone hunting us. And I was able to, because of databases, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension gave me the age, the sex, and how someone died. Those 3 pieces of information. So I went to the Minneapolis Star and Tribune database, and I went to the St. Paul Pioneer Press database, and I'd put in female 29 stabbed, and then I would get various hits. And I think it was like 38 women who were mostly prostitutes that had been beaten, stabbed, or strangled in the previous 8 years. So obviously there was a serial killer.
There's definitely a pattern. And
I went to a woman who graduated from Silence of the Lambs, the profiling school. And I talked to her for quite some time, but I just couldn't get her to tell me whether or not she was like mum's the word. But in the interim, I'd compiled this list of these women that had been murdered. And I went to the Minneapolis Police Department. I went to the St. Paul Police Department. And I gave them the list. And I said, are you sure you want to go on with that? There isn't any serial killers. And the guy that ran homicide for St. Paul, he was a good guy. And he said that, yeah, it's entirely possible, even though he should have said yes, definitely. The guy who ran Minneapolis homicide, he was kind of receptive to the idea, but I mean, there was this, there was all this evidence, and then ultimately, what happened was a task force.
What year is this? If you don't mind me asking.
This is in 1995.
Okay, so this is 95. Thank you.
So a task force was formed.
Okay.
To catch this guy. They never caught him, but and I realized, wow, with journalism, I can actually do something. I can affect change. Whereas I've been writing these academic papers for 5 years and nothing's ever happened. So that's when I made my jump to journalism at that point.
Okay.
Yes, because the rich and powerful don't like their stories keeping out.
They don't. They don't.
Which is why we are feared and hated.
And then I moved to New York City shortly after that article was published. And it was towards the end of 1995. And I just started a freelance writing career. I was very fortunate. I'd had a lot of clips. So I could approach New York publishers and show them all the things that I'd written, which made it much, much easier. I think it would have been impossible had I not had like a track record of having things published. So at that point, I embarked on my freelance writing career. And I've got a lot of interest, and philosophy of science was one of the areas that I really liked in philosophy of science, and also Immanuel Kant's philosophy. And I did a lot of science reporting very early on. And I liked that a lot, but I was also doing investigative journalism too at that point. But it's hard. Investigative journalism takes a lot of work, and you got to go down a lot of rabbit holes a lot of the time. And sometimes you're going to get pay dirt and sometimes you're not. But I had these various investigative stories I was working on. But then I was talking to an editor in New York, and because I'd written about very dark subjects, at that point I'd written about the serial killers, the Hells Angels, and cops that were doing hits for the mob.
Right.
So he kind of pegged me as a guy that writes dark stuff. So he said, pitch me dark stuff. And I just threw my hands up and said, Nazis, Satanists. I mean,
right. I mean, we could just we could go to town all day.
So,
there's a lot of darkness.
And then there was that glint in his eye, and he said, Satanists. So I had an easy plan. Now, whenever anybody says they have an easy plan, you know it's going to be antithetical to that. So I had an easy plan. I was going to meet some Satanists. I was going to go to a black mass. I was going to write an article, and I was going to get a decent payday. It wasn't going to be that big of a deal.
The universe said no, 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 no.
And while you're investigating or writing about something, at least for me, and actually other writers that I know, you're trolling the internet looking for tangential information. And I came across this U.S. Customs report on a cult called the Finders. And two of the Finders were busted in a Tallahassee, Florida park with 6 kids that were ragamuffins. And a concerned citizen had called the Tallahassee Police Department. And the Tallahassee Police Department took a look at these 2 guys who were, I think, dressed in suits, and then these 6 ragamuffin kids. And they arrested the guys on multiple counts of child abuse. And actually, a doctor had said that 2 of the kids showed signs of sexual abuse. And then they put the 6 kids who were ages 2 to 6 in protective custody. And the Tallahassee Police Department got a call from the DC Police Department because that cult, the Finders, was out of DC. That was their home base.
Interesting.
And so the DC Police and the U.S. Customs Agency executed a search warrant on the Finders. The cult was called the Finders, on the Finders warehouse. And it's a pretty stunning document. And it's floating around New York, or floating around the internet. And actually, we put the entire report in the Franklin scandal because it's mind-boggling. What those guys came across was child pornography or child abuse material. There was a telex about the Finders buying a couple of kids in Hong Kong. There just there was a lot of things that were seemingly extremely nefarious about the Finders. They would answer ads where people were looking for babysitters and then collect intelligence on that particular family. And ultimately what happened, Ramon Martinez wrote the report. He was the U.S. Customs officer in charge, and nothing was happening. And about a month later, he went to the DC police and he said, what's going on with that investigation? And someone from the DC police spoke with him off record and said that the investigation into the Finders is the CIA internal matter, and that there will be no more investigation whatsoever. So the CIA played their national security card. And,
I hate when they do that.
And I mean, prior to that, I knew that the CIA had done some nefarious things in Guatemala and Chile and Iran. I didn't really know that much about the mind control stuff. I just thought it was mostly LSD. I've since learned that there was a lot of other things going on.
But are you talking about the MK Ultra stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
MK Ultra, Bluebird, and MK Naomi. There were various mind control, Artichoke. There were various mind control programs, but I was stunned by that. What is the CIA doing? Well, first of all, they can't operate domestically. I mean, that's never stopped them, but it's against the law for them to operate domestically.
They're not supposed to, is the word for it.
And that kind of shocked me. But what really shocked me was, why were they going to bat for a cult that seemingly did very nefarious things to children? I didn't have a paradigm to account for that. It was so overwhelming psychologically and emotionally. And I started to look for similar phenomena. And that ultimately led me to Omaha, Nebraska, where the internet was rife with all kinds of things about this particular network. And some of it was right, some of it was wrong. I mean, it got mixed up with shape-shifting reptilians and the Illuminati and things like that. But I went there and I was skeptical. But I knew something had gone down in Omaha. I thought it was kind of confined to Omaha. That was my initial extrapolation on it. So I went to Omaha and I talked to one of the victims, and then and then I was able to get to one of the blackmail photographers, which was kind of amazing. And I talked to a senator there was actually a Senate subcommittee in Nebraska that was looking into this, that was looking into the child trafficking allegations. And I talked to him, and then I talked to one of the early whistleblowers because some of the kids that were being trafficked were in foster care homes. And there was a woman that oversaw, it was Foster Care Review Board. And so I was talking to her and I was talking to the senator, and it was like I was writing an expose on the KGB in Stalinist Russia. I mean, people were terrified to talk to me. And this network was in operation throughout most of the 80s, and it was covered up in the late 80s and early 90s. And then I was followed, and then on my last night, I had a death threat. So I realized, whoa. And then I came back to New York, and I had a mentor named Jerry Ballinger. He was a retired journalist, and I loved this guy. I loved him as much as I can love anybody. And we were walking through Washington Square Park, and I said, Jerry, it's true. It's these people were trafficking kids. The feds covered it up. I believe there was blackmail involved. I believe there was a CIA connection involved. And at this point, I never really had a death threat before. So at this point, we're walking through Washington Square Park, which is a very nice park, and I'm looking on the rooftops for snipers. I'm a little.
Oh dear.
I'm a little bit juiced. So we sat down, and Jerry said to me, this is going to be dangerous if you continue. This can be a dangerous investigation for you. And if you decide to walk away from it, I will not have any less respect for it. And I said, Jerry, all those kids were molested with impunity. That network was huge. I believe it was bigger than Epstein's network. And according to state and federal law enforcement, not a single child had been abused by that network. And I said, what these guys got away with in Nebraska and also Washington, D.C., I can't walk away from this. It's too evil for me to walk away from. If
morally and ethically, you couldn't do it.
So that started a 7-year odyssey for me, where I went to Nebraska, I believe 13 times, and I went to Washington, D.C. A couple of times, and I went to a bunch of other places trying to find. There was a investigator for the Senate subcommittee that had compiled some. He was a great investigator, and his plane blew up when he was flying back to Nebraska with some incriminating evidence. So, but I got a lot of his stuff, and he had a leads list that named a bunch of perpetrators, and there was also 60 victims. On the leads list, or alleged victims. So at that point, it was up to me to really find the victims, to get a critical mass of victims to talk to me. And then at a certain point, one of the grand juries were used with Epstein. According to the Florida grand jury that investigated Epstein, he didn't abuse a single child. Grand juries are infamous for being cooked. It's
really
a special prosecutor is chosen for a grand jury, and grand jury sounds like the gods of jurisprudence have spoken, but that's.
I always kind of visualize them as kind of the gatekeeper jury,
Well,
from evidence to charging, like they're the gatekeeper of, is there going to be justice?
With grand juries, a special prosecutor is chosen, and grand jurors are just people that have shown up for jury duty, and they have no idea what the case is about, because it's their knowledge is completely predicated on the special prosecutor. He shows them the evidence that he or she deems is appropriate, and he calls the witnesses that he or she deems appropriate. So they're in an amazing position to twist grand jurors. And actually, there was a New York Supreme Court justice that said special prosecutors have so much power over grand jurors that they can get them to indict a ham sandwich. And there were 2 grand juries in Omaha that declared that not a single child had been abused, a state and a federal grand jury. And the state grand jury waited for about 4 months, and I was able to get almost all the documentation, the sealed documentation from that grand jury. And at that point, it was just about, I had all the evidence. It was just about finding enough people that would talk to me. And then the Franklin scandal was published in 2009, 2010. And then I started looking into Jeffrey Epstein. And it was very obvious to me that Jeffrey Epstein had molested a number of girls.
Mm-hmm.
But this grand jury had said that he hadn't molested a single girl. So, and I was really, I mean, writing the Franklin scandal had taken a lot out of me.
I'm sure.
It was.
That was so, I mean, that you can read it and it's blood, sweat, and tears in there. Like you can feel the energy when you read that book.
And I flew down to Florida. I wasn't really sure if I was psychologically intact enough for another investigation like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided I had to check it out. It just reeked of a network to me. A power broker network that I uncovered in the Franklin scandal. And then I was there about a week, and then I got Epstein's Black Book.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to call the
quick question. Which Black Book? Did you get the one that was the early Black Book, or
Yes.
the one that was the Palm Beach Black Book?
I got the first one that has all his contacts around the world, and it's filled with it's like 94 pages, and a lot of them are a lot of power brokers. And,
in fact, one of the people in there is the fake name he used for the Austrian passport that he had.
Yes, and I got the Black Book, and then Epstein euphemistically put his victims under massage.
Mm-hmm.
So I started calling them, and then the first one that was willing to talk to me was a strange conversation, because I was talking to her mother. Her mother wanted to help me, and she wanted to help me, but the mother didn't want the girl to talk to me. And so I asked the mother questions, and then she asked her daughter questions, and the daughter responded, and the mother responded to me. So that was the first conversation. And she had said that she was 13 years old when she was initially molested by Jeffrey Epstein, which flies in the face of the cover story. And then I called another woman who was willing to talk to me, and she talked about being flown around and flown to an island. And so I felt like at that point that Epstein was a network. This was 2011, and I came back to New York with the Black Book, and no one would touch it. Nobody would touch it. And I sat on it for a little over 3 years before someone would publish it. And that's how the Black Book, and in the interim, I'd gotten his flight logs too. So I was the guy that put both the Black Book and the flight logs on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
We thank you for your research.
We thank you so much for your work and what the energy you've put into survivors and justice, frankly. In fact, that leads me to mention you have a little operation called Epstein Justice. And for anybody who follows us regularly, I make sure that I put your monthly podcasts up in our Epstein wiki, and we put it on the calendar, and they're always spectacular. So I always recommend everybody go, and you're going to learn something each and every time.
The last one was very successful. We interviewed Cullen Brown, who is a very popular podcaster who's thrown a lot of his energy into uncovering the various cover-ups within the Epstein case. Yeah, we had a good turnout this last.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And we put a clip. We put a clip on Facebook, and we went from like 1,700 followers. We're up to 9,000 now because of that clip. So that's really kind of cool.
Congratulations. I'll make sure to include that a link to that episode on our receipts blog that we put this podcast onto. So one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you in, I of course want to talk all things Epstein justice, but there's a recent article that I felt like it really made me uncomfortable, which is what our work does, right? We're doing it properly if it's making the reader feel something. And I would like for you to talk about this article that you wrote and the journey and what we've found.
It started with the Super Bowl last year, and there was an advocacy organization called World Without Exploitation, and they ran a Super Bowl commercial. And I've been working on Epstein for a very long time.
Decades.
Well, actually 15 years. And I felt that was amazing that an advocacy group could have a commercial for this. But then I thought to myself,
how did they pay for it?
That's a lot of money. That's $7 to $8 million per 30 seconds or so.
Yes, it is.
And so I started to investigate them, and they have, for lack of a better word, a cadre of Epstein survivors that they've cultivated, and they've actually become the interface for the Epstein survivors to the government. I mean, I was told by an Epstein survivor that the people that are running World Without Exploitation were choosing which Epstein survivors would speak to the oversight committee.
Wow, so they're kind of controlling our survivors and their voice a little, it sounds like.
Well, that's what I was concerned about. And then I looked into the background of one of the founders. Her name was Lauren Hirsch. And she was an assistant Brooklyn DA, and she had suppressed evidence in a case that she was prosecuting. And she had been the special prosecutor of a grand jury. And it came out that she was pressuring one of her subordinates to prosecute the case, and the subordinate said, "This is too problematic. I can't prosecute this case," and she resigned. And then a second subordinate started to prosecute the case, and she had found where there was a victim of abuse. And the victim had recanted what she had to say. And the second prosecutor found the recantation. And the recantation had been suppressed. And 4 guys had been at Rikers Island. It's a prison/jail in New York. And she went before an ethics panel, which concluded that she had done nothing wrong, but then she resigned 4 hours later. So obviously there was
sounds like there was a negotiation made.
And that kind of stunned me a little bit, because if you're a prosecutor and you're not presenting all the evidence that there is to present, regardless, I do believe that this victim had been abused by some of these guys. I do believe that. And she gave a statement to the police, but then basically the same day she recanted it all. And I think that it was kind of a complex situation where these guys were Crips, and I think that she had been abused in her home, and I think that abuse made her susceptible to being abused by this gang. And but she did, I guess, had loved one of them, and she said that he had been mean to her, and that's why she had blown the whistle to
right.
And it was really egregious that all this evidence didn't come out. And one of those guys was actually put in prison for 24 years for trafficking women and minors. And I think because the way that the evidence was suppressed, this victim was never able to get justice. I know that she recanted after when she talked to a second police officer.
Well, but she was terrified. Yes. I mean, come on. We know, any of us in the psychology field know that how hard it is to come forward. And the minute that you get pushed back, most of us are going to go, I'm out. You know?
So I think that it could have been handled differently.
Okay.
And that those issues that came up could have been addressed, but instead the evidence was repressed. And that poor girl, Lauren Hirsch was the special prosecutor of that grand jury. And I think that this girl had a lot of psychological problems. I mean, understandably. So I think that if it had been handled differently, there might have been some justice for this particular victim. But the evidence was suppressed, and so consequently, there was no justice. There was no justice for the victim. And the perps, or the 4 Crips, were put in Rikers Island for almost a year. After a recantation. The whole thing was problematic. And so this was Lauren Hirsch, who was one of the founders of World Without Exploitation. And once I saw that, I realized, okay, she resigned from the Brooklyn DA's office. She somehow got millions of dollars for this Super Bowl ad. And she seems to be exercising an inordinate amount of
and she's not particularly wealthy, correct? She's not particularly wealthy, doesn't come from a bunch of money, didn't marry into money, doesn't have a lot of friends with money that might be willing to offer that support.
And then I heard anecdotes of her and the woman that works with her, Rachel Foster, having an inordinate amount of control over the Epstein victims with regards to who would testify. So at that point, I wrote a book about Watergate, and I showed that what Woolver and Bernstein said through all their reporting was absolute rubbish and lies. But I did follow the money on this one. And when I found the money, I immediately bumped heads with an organization called Tides. And Tides is a nonprofit organization that has, of 2024, $846 million in total assets. A nonprofit organization that has nearly $1 billion in assets. And like, I run Epstein Justice. We're a 501c3. We've got to file 990s. It's just
right. It's the law. If you're a 501c3, you got to file this. Boom.
And it's just so the IRS can make sure that you're adhering to the rules of a nonprofit organization. And then I found out they didn't file 990s, World Without Exploitation, because they were, quote unquote, fiscally sponsored by Tides.
Doesn't Tide have links to Epstein in some fashion?
Yeah. It's but there was, Tides also fiscally sponsored Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter launched a very acerbic lawsuit at Tides, saying that Tides had burned them for $34 million. And Black Lives Matter had a lot of problems. The people that were running Black Lives Matter bought mansions and things like that. And I don't think that there was really stellar accounting that was done for with Black Lives Matter. And so Tides was aware of that, and they leveraged it. And then Black Lives Matter retracted its lawsuit and all the acerbic things that it had said about Tides. So World Without Exploitation had that same arrangement with Tides, is that they didn't file 990s, and they've been around for like 11 years. I mean, I understand getting fiscally sponsored for a couple of years maybe, but at a certain point, I think that it's just judicious to start filing your own 990s. So the thing about the 990s and not filing 990s and what's going on with Tides is the funding is opaque.
Oh, so wait, I need to clarify something, if that's okay. My ADD kind of, I need to put something together. So is Tides a non-for-profit?
Yes.
Or is it okay, so it's a non-for-profit, but they are also not publishing their funding?
They publish their funding. They're like, their last 990 said that they had $846 million in assets, but they don't publish who's giving them the money. So
Dark money.
So we don't know who's giving Tides. I was able to find out a number of parties that were giving money to Tides, millions of dollars to Tides, who were affiliated with Epstein. But
let's talk about those.
that's a real problem. So we have no idea of who's funding World Without Exploitation other than Tides. And I mean, there's other groups that they're working with, but they seem to be getting a lot of money from Tides, which is a very opaque organization, and it's called dark money. And it plays an integral role in our political system.
Well, dark money, absolutely.
Now
we're back to the darkness again.
You saw what happened to Thomas Massey in Kentucky, and he was running against a guy whose name I forget and probably will never remember again.
Clearly, he's not important. So
I don't agree with Massey on a lot of topics, but I think he is a good man, and I would like for him to have an office, because I think he does represent a part of the population that needs to be represented, and I think he's an honorable man. That's just me.
He has a spine. That's all that matters.
Well, and no, I think he's actually ethical. I have seen him change his views when he got more data. I have seen him, and not because he's a flip-flopper, because he got more data and has explained why he changed his views. And I do think he really believes in America, and I think he's a patriot. That word patriot sounds nasty these days. I think he's an honorable man, and I would vote for him. And I'm about as far leftist as you get. So
I think that he's an honorable guy too. And actually, he was the first politician in the Congress to support Epstein justice, which I thought was, because we've gone to a lot of politicians and a lot of them have been reluctant to support Epstein justice. But anyway, what you saw with Thomas Massey and that race was, I've heard anywhere from $33 to $44 million was pumped into that race. And a lot of it was dark money. And Tides gives money to political causes. And it's dark money. So we have, with World Without Exploitation, Tides giving money to World Without Exploitation, and we have no idea of who's supplying the money from the other side.
So go on. Tell us more. I want people to hear this track, and I really support their work, but I'm a little afraid to now, based on some of the information. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Well, when you look at some of the Epstein cronies or perps, Sergey Brin was at Epstein Island.
Sergey, yeah.
Mr. Google.
I know who Sergey is. Very good. Yes.
So he was at Epstein's Island on more than one occasion. And
Okay.
he's given a tremendous amount of money to Tides. And actually, Tides gave Ghislaine Maxwell, it's right there in the Epstein files, $100,000 for her Terramar project, which was ostensibly to clean up the ocean. So you've got Tides giving money to Ghislaine Maxwell, who's definitely a perpetrator in all this, and then we don't know what Sergey Brin. We know that Sergey Brin was an Epstein crony. We don't know whether or not he was a perpetrator, but we also know that he has given millions of dollars to Tides. And Epstein had a go-to shrink named Henry Jarecki. And Jarecki's sons, Nicholas and Andrew, are esteemed filmmakers. And Jarecki is not only a psychiatrist, but he's a billionaire. And he was able, in his spare time as a psychiatrist, he got into high finance. And he was able to turn, it might have been gold futures. It's how he became a billionaire is slightly opaque to me, but I think it had something to do with gold futures. But anyway, Epstein would send victims to Jarecki, and Jarecki would give them benzodiazepines or maybe a more
whatever
potent,
they needed to make them more comfortable to do what he wanted.
And antidepressants also. And there was Jane Doe 11, who actually had received a settlement from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, which we should talk about, which I think is totally corrupt. But Jarecki essentially made her a sex slave, and he would farm her out to his buddies, and it was really horrible. And Jarecki said that it was a consensual relationship, but there's
not when there's a power dynamic. It's not.
And the guy is 60 years older than this woman, so you know. And then Bill Gates, Mr. Altruism. Bill Gates gives a lot of money to Tides. And actually, I was able to go on the Wayback Machine, and Tides gets money from, it had it that it was in partnership with Gates Foundation, USAID, Ford Foundation. And USAID has a history of having connections to CIA, and so does the Ford Foundation. And so Gates gave, in 2022, 2023, and 2024, the Gates Foundation gave Tides $300,000, $7,500,000, and $2,800,000. So Bill Gates, he's a perpetrator that has been pumping money into Tides. And then we come to Reid Hoffman. And Reid is he was the guy that was giving money to World Without Exploitation. And what makes this so ominous is these emails were released. Reid Hoffman hates Donald Trump, and he has financed lawsuits against Donald Trump. And he'll do anything, he'll finance, and the Trump administration has declared lawfare on Reid Hoffman. But here's the thing with Reid Hoffman. He was part of the PayPal mafia with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And actually, Peter Thiel, a very unsavory character who has no connection to Tides, that I was able to find, called him the fireman, because he put out so many fires. And then he started LinkedIn, and he was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, and he ultimately sold LinkedIn to Bill Gates for, I think, $26 billion. And he's on the board. But he financed a Monday night football commercial the night before the Congress was going to vote on the Epstein file, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. But then he was the guy that also gave World Without Exploitation millions of dollars to run that Super Bowl commercial. And the thing about Hoffman is, some of these guys, they're just so arrogant. And that's how we're going to win, is arrogance makes people really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Arrogance and sex are two things that make people extremely stupid. And with Hoffman, he had this protracted email exchange with his friend, Jeffrey Epstein. And he was talking about how he can help clean up Jeffrey Epstein's reputation online. And he was commiserating with Jeffrey Epstein about him being a predator and felt like Jeffrey Epstein was a swell guy. Mm-hmm. So here's the guy. And throughout those email exchanges with Epstein, which are a number of them, which I talk about, he has no concern whatsoever for the Epstein victims. None. And he just thought that he could give this money to War Without Exploitation and that it would hurt Trump. Well, actually, when those documents came out, they really hurt Hoffman too. Hoffman apparently thought that he was going to be exempt from that his email correspondences with Epstein weren't going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And it's what's alarming here is it's ultimately what Reid Hoffman was doing was making child sex trafficking and child abuse material a partisan issue. And that is the problem with Epstein, is it's been a bipartisan cover-up. It started out with George Bush too, the cognitively challenged George Bush. And then it went to Obama, then it went to Biden, and then it went to Trump. So there's been two Democratic presidential administrations and two Republican presidential administrations that have played an integral role in covering up.
Yeah, I don't consider this to be a Republican/Dem issue. I consider this to be more of, at least this is my opinion, the powerful versus the not powerful issue. And the powerful have enough ability to smoke screen and quell everything because they're like a virus that just infests things, more like a fungus.
The evidence definitely seems to point that direction.
Right.
This is not about right and left.
It's about right and wrong.
No, it's about up and down.
Up and down. Okay.
And it's the people in the Epstein class that think that they can get away with anything they want, that think that they've transcended the common man's morality. There was a economist, his name is Thurstein Veblen, one of my favorite Minnesotans of all time.
Oh.
And he wrote a book called Theory of the Leisure Class.
Theory of the Leisure Class?
Yeah, where he showed that the leisure class or the upper class is predatory by nature.
Absolutely.
And he came after Marx because Marx said that there's going to be a chasm that's going to be so wide that revolution is inevitable. And Veblen came along. He was a very eccentric guy. To read about his life is kind of humorous. And Theory of the Leisure Class, amazing book. But anyway, published in 1904 and 1905. Veblen came along and he said, no, that's not what's going to happen. The leisure class is going to groom the proletariat or the middle class to have the same predatory instincts as the leisure class. And occasionally there'll be someone from the working class that'll rise and come into the leisure class, like Jeffrey Epstein was able to do. And that's why there won't be a revolution, is because people will want to be just like the leisure class. They won't want to rebel against the leisure class. They want to be like the leisure class.
Well, let's talk about those survivors and if they knew where the money was coming from for that Super Bowl ad.
I don't believe any of them did.
Yeah, they
And
pretty much keep them like mushrooms, I expect.
And so they're being exploited because
Again.
they're like props.
it's very unfortunate that, and there was an Epstein survivor that was part of Epstein Justice. And when that article came out, she didn't want to believe it. There were some other anti-trafficking organizations that didn't want to believe that I was sullying the good works of World Without Exploitation. And
Right. It sounds like a good organization on the front.
it's all there. I mean, everything has a hyperlink. I mean, there isn't really any extrapolations in that article. I'm just presenting the facts. And I know that World Without Exploitation, it's run by two lawyers, and Reid Hoffman is a billionaire. So I knew that we were going up against something that was
The
potentially
billionaire
libelous.
class.
And I was really impressed the way that Zero Hedge stepped up and published it. They'd published stuff of mine before, but this was a very explosive article. And the way that Zero Hedge published it, I mean, I really respect that.
Wow, it's fantastic.
So
We're just about out of time, though, so let's wrap it up.
Oh, I just was curious why you chose the outlet you did to publish it.
I couldn't really get anybody to publish it. I can't. If you look at my LinkedIn, I'm a very accomplished writer. I mean, I've been published in very good journals. I've been published in very good magazines. I've had books published. I could not write an article for the mainstream media. They would not publish an article of mine. I had a friend who was an editor at a very popular intellectual magazine, and about once a year he'd submit Nick Bryant stories. And the last time he submitted a Nick Bryant story, his boss took him to lunch and said, "No more Nick Bryant stories." And
why?
Because I think I temper things with a little too much truth. Epstein. I mean, it took me 3.5 years to get Epstein's Black Book published. I mean, after the Black Book got published, then the floodgates opened it. But there's only 2 publications that have credited me, 2 mainstream publications that have credited me with putting the Black Book and flight logs on the internet. So Nick Bryant is persona non grata from the mainstream media. And a friend of mine was having dinner. I live in New York City, and a friend of mine was having dinner with someone who got a network talk show, and he said to him, "Have you heard of Nick Bryant?" And the guy said, "Oh, that guy's a conspiracy theorist." So, and then my buddy said, "Nick is not a conspiracy theorist," and I'm not a conspiracy. So that's how I've been pegged. But think about this. I was pitching the Franklin scandal. I was pitching a story about a power broker pedophile network that was covered up by state and federal law enforcement in 2004. By the time I started pitching that article, I had enough to pitch it in 2004. I started in 2002, but by 2004, I had enough. And no one was willing to touch it in the mainstream media. And I could see the cognitive dissonance go down right before my eyes. I could just, because I'd sit across the table and I'd look at them in the eyes, and I could see this is really a horrible story. We need to help Nick Bryant. Or I can just write Nick Bryant off as crazy and have a nice dinner with my family tonight and not have to deal with this. And I knew that most people, and I had a lot of connections in New York publishing at that point. I knew that most would take that route, but I didn't think all of them would take that route. And I did have one friend apologize to me some years later, that he said, and he was possibly in a position to help me. He worked at a network. And he said, I'm sorry that I could have been a much better friend to you at that point. And but only one. I mean, these people really they'll put their careers are going to go above the truth for sure. We saw it with the New York Times. The New York Times published an article 3 or 4 months ago that said Jeffrey Epstein has absolutely no ties to intelligence, foreign or domestic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to my website, nickbryantnyc.com, and there's a 7,200 word article that delineates a number of the connections that Jeffrey Epstein had with the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy how they'll do that. Jobs over truth. And that's why we're here, because we don't get paid.
Well, I want to thank you, Nick, and I very, very much would love to have you back on so we could talk more about Epstein justice and the Epstein justice goals. And we are including on Epstein Wiki. We have your information on there so that if people want to donate to Epstein, I even think I included in Everyday's blog. Actually, I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that I include. If you want to, I always add a call to action at the end of my blogs, and I think one is to donate to one of your funds, and we would love to have you back. So I'd love
to come back. Epstein is a vast universe, and
it is.
We just talked about one corner of it today.
Even like just one small atom, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. So thank you so much.
Definitely have you back.
We have much to talk about, and I'd be more than happy to come back.
Well, thank you again, and thank you for that piece.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
It was a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye. All right, gang. Well, that wraps up another episode. We're finding today that it sure looks as though that our survivors may be being exploited again.
Quick recap. I just want to
make
sure I understand this as not as deep in the weeds as you are. But so the World Without Exploitation is registered as a nonprofit, but they have secret dark money ties. And they had a Super Bowl ad. I don't know because I don't watch sports, but so they had a Super Bowl ad about what was it? The don't hire Todd Blanche or something like that.
Don't hire Todd Blanche.
And they got him anyways. That just came out on the news today. But
yeah.
Anyways, so secret dark money ties with Epstein victims that aren't aware that some of the money is coming from Epstein's
dark money. Apparently Tara Maher donated to Tides, and then Tides donated to the World Without Exploitation. It sounds like
that just sounds like a front. But like my thing is like I don't understand why this dark money group tied to Epstein would not want Todd Blanche. It seems like he's on their side.
Exactly.
Like why wouldn't they want Todd Blanche up there? Why would they spend millions of dollars on an ad and then manipulate survivors to that part confuses me, but I guess
maybe somebody feels guilty.
Ooh,
maybe it's a front. Maybe
it's a front.
Somebody is trying to claim their soul.
My money's on the front.
I think so.
Because
I think we should dig into this.
Exploitation sounds like a good group
Well, the part that bothered me the most about this particular the one thing that bothered me was the outlet that published the article. The outlet that published the article is kind of known. I'm going to say this is my opinion in order to avoid a lawsuit, but they're kind of known for sharing Russian propaganda. And so if it wasn't Nick, and I've known Nick and I've known his work for decades, literally decades, I wouldn't have given this article a second thought. So it's all just kind of this mess.
It raises more questions than answers,
It does.
And that's why we'll definitely have to have Nick come back and answer more questions when he has more time.
And I think I'm going to get someone in our team to take this beat and see if they can't dig a little further and find out what they find.
Yeah, we have a very competent team with
we do
vast skills.
because there's lots of information still missing.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, gang. Well, we've just completed another episode of the Butterfly Bureau. We hope that you will continue to do that thing where you click the thing that you tell us that you like us, and click that other thing where you'll get our podcast.
That's overrated. We're going to be shadow banned anyways.
I know, absolutely. All right, gang. We'll see you next time on the Butterfly
Bye-bye.
Bureau.